Welcome back to LoftCast Radio, where thinking happens out loud and it's not only permitted, it's encouraged. I'm your host, Cassie Higgins, and today's Raw Signal is unpacking the conscious activation of an emerging thought here on LoftCast Radio. Let's dive in. I had this thought before I fell asleep last night. I often have this where I'll start thinking a thought, unpacking something throughout the day or something like that, and it'll kind of come to me. And I realized yesterday while I was falling asleep that the way that we teach the English language, and I'm talking about English specifically because I don't actually know how they teach other languages to kids. I'm just familiar with the systems that we use here in the United States, and really not even the United States, just the systems that I've been a part of, and the systems that I've experienced and I've been able to observe myself. So the systems I've been able to observe myself have primarily heavily relied on language being taught in the form of like grammatical correctness and spelling correctness and pronunciation correctness. Although I don't even know if the pronunciation correctness is nearly as looked at as I think it might have been or think it probably should have been. So I'm not even sure about that one. But it's very interesting because I grew up my whole life thinking I was dumb and honestly being told by the system that I was dumb or delayed or slow. Or I literally remember when I was in 5th grade, my parents sat with my teacher out in Northville, and she just told my parents right in front of me that Cassie's always going to be average, and that's what you're going to get from her. So just, kind of get comfortable with that concept. And I was like, holy cow, in 5th grade, this woman can determine the trajectory and the success of my entire life because of where I'm at in 5th grade and what she's basically been able to summarize up until this point. So I was thinking about it with all those concepts, being aware inside my system, and probably more than I can even articulate at this moment. But it was really interesting when I realized, we spend so much time on grammar and the structure of the grammar around what we're saying that we don't really even look at the architecture that we're building. And what do I mean by that? I mean, when we're saying things, we're not being taught to, recursively or even participate with those thoughts or words and what they're actually trying to articulate and convey to somebody else. Like, we're more worried about where the comma goes so it sounds right in like a grammatical sense than we are in an architectural sense that allows us to truly convey our meaning. Now, what do I mean by that? So a lot of times when we say something for the first time, especially for the first time, but it's not subject to the first time, we're really really thinking something. So thinking something for the first time, responding to something for the first time. Maybe you're in the middle of something you've seen before, but the pressure and the environment around you is different. We're not really taught to sort through those signals that come into our head and that we then try to repurpose into language on the way back out. We're more worried about structuring the language that came back out than really identifying if the language that came out was really precise and articulating our true meaning and what we're trying to get at. Or if the things that we're even saying are like, we're not even taught to look at what we're saying to see if that's even what we meant. You know what I mean? There's so many times you say, I didn't know I said that, because you're literally formulating thoughts. Like, your brain has a bunch of different conscious layers that I'm aware of that will kind of come together through all the different layers of your perception, your experiences, your temperament, your tolerance, what you've been taught, it's right and wrong, your beliefs, like all of these different things that kind of sit up in your head that are the layers of perception that your mind really, formulates all of this reality around in order to, facilitate these thoughts come out. And usually the first take at it is the worst version. That's why people have to do many drafts of something. And the more you're able to write down, and this is why I always talk about mental mastication. This is kind of a term I kind of coined a while back, that if you're not processing those thoughts that are in your head and really getting down to like, why did I say it like that? Like, my brother made a comment to my husband the other day, like, without you, we'd be lost in the wind. And I thought, what a interesting phrase, lost in the wind. What does that mean? And we take a lot of things for granted. Oh, we just lost in the wind. No, we're assigning our intent and our understanding of what that might mean to, my brother Scott. However, I don't really know how he meant that. And I don't know that he spent time thinking on what he actually meant. And there's so many times that we spend so little time or so little effort really even sorting through what we said, but we get so angry and so irritated that other people didn't understand us, which is really a frustrating, fulfilling loop. You know what I mean? Like, unless you're really able to start looking at what you're saying and what you meant and what it all, like, literally that becomes the architecture of what you're saying. So if your architecture is weak, broken, fragmented, full of static, like, it's chances are somebody else is going to have a hard time in interpreting that signal the way you actually meant it. So I was kind of thinking about all that stuff, and I thought, holy cow, this is crazy that we even like operate the way we do, that we're more interested in like structuring the sentences than evaluating the sentences that we're even freaking writing. So one of the principles at the Loft is like, there is a process to how thoughts come out and how you can interact with them that is actually a structural procedural process that really doesn't impede creativity. It actually enhances it, because you're able to capture that live signal, like those initial thoughts that are coming out. You're able to get them down and then go back through them with a conscious effort to say, what was I really thinking? What things did I realize were attached here? Where did I skip things that I thought were implied? Where, like, literally when we do this with the kids, because I follow this process with the kids during our lessons, many times they find they skipped words, sections, thoughts, all these things. We do that as adults, but we're not practiced as young people. Yeah, we do proofreading, but like proofreading isn't really like scoping the lens to what did you really mean? What did you really feel? What was really happening? What things dictated why you said that versus what you really wanted to say? Was there somebody else inhibiting your ability to speak truth? So you tried to move the needle a little bit to accommodate for somebody else? What was going on in that moment? And what did you really say with all of those things in mind? And did it actually match what you meant? Or did it really more match what you were trying to avoid? What were you trying to avoid? Why were you trying to avoid it? Why does this have anything to do with you? Why are you worried about this particular person's field? What's coming out of that person that made you feel this way? Like, there's a lot of different complexities and nuances that happen inside someone's thought world that really don't get evaluated at all. And as a society, we don't really focus on that at all. So a lot of kids grow up, a lot of people and adults grow up, and they don't even think about the things they're saying. They literally think that language is this inherited thing, that we're taught how to use words and we're able to just transfer them to other people. And that's just totally incorrect in my mind, in my perception, and in my world through my lens. I think maybe incorrect's a bad word. It's an interesting approach that you would skip building the architecture and the understanding and the processing of the meaning of the words that we're trying to convey to other people, especially because as humans now, not quite sure how it was before, but right now we heavily rely on language as our main source of communication and interaction with others in order to facilitate the world we're trying to build. So it's very interesting to me that we not only skip the concept of building the architecture, we skip the idea of processing our thoughts, we skip the idea that we may have been misinterpreted in the beginning, and actually we skip the premise that the first time we say something or think about it is going to be the absolute lowest altitude that we have on that subject matter. Now, sometimes can raw signal come in sharp and roaring? Absolutely. I love working with raw signal. Raw signal is actually what I'm working with right now. All of these thoughts are coming to me as I'm articulating them, or at least within, a couple seconds of me articulating them from thinking them. But that's a practice as well. Most people think that speech is happening simultaneously with thought, and that is not true. If you're able to slow down the process of cognition, or it might actually be that you're speeding up the process of cognition so that it slows down the feeling of time between thinking and speaking. I actually can do this in certain instances. I can't do it routinely, but there are times that I am speaking, especially if it's a topic that I have altitude on, meaning that I've had time to process and think about that thought for a while. I can actually start dictating and editing what I'm saying before it comes out of my mouth, between I thought it and what I say it. So, but that's a practice. So I truly believe that there is different layers of cognition that we're able to ascend in altitude through, and each of those layers of cognition have a different purpose and a different aperture that they're able to see through. But the thing is, the cognition is attached to the person, and the person is a living system, which means that cognition in itself is a time that can expand and contract, just like every other need and every other season and every other state. So it's not that you can stay in these heightened states all the time, but if you're aware of them and you practice inside them, it can make the traditional operating that happens more on a more rhythmic and systemic scale truly balance out, and you can have just a better awareness of that. So it's interesting to me that we don't even think about that. We don't talk about it. I've never heard anybody talk about these things to me in my life. I formulated all of these thoughts through my own perception of what I'm seeing. And that's what I mean by natural intelligence when I'm talking about natural intelligence. Like, what can my system naturally build and learn without having to go to other people and other resources in order to like form my thoughts? Like, what if I just evaluate, observe, and interpret and really process the information that's coming in and observe it on real systems that can't be manipulated, like nature itself can't be manipulated, although it might be actually manipulated by the governments. But in general, if we're just normal people planting a garden, or we have trees or vegetation or something on our, because even if you have weeds, you can still observe this process. If you are not, that's why we practice, that's what I mean by natural intelligence, is you're observing natural processes and natural systems that are not manipulated. They're not designed for you to go in a particular path. You can really start to formulate your own natural intelligence and what that means and how systems really work and how that mirrors the relationship back to you and what happens inside our systems. Because I think there's this really, really interesting phenomenon that's happened over time where people no longer realize that they're themselves the living system that is life, because we've externalized so much of life to be this thing that we observe and we participate in, but we're not it. It's actually incredibly bizarre that we're no longer the life like form in a lot of our minds, or at least for me, I wasn't even conscious of that until just the other day when I brought these sunflowers home. So I had these sunflowers. I've told this story. I published, a piece on the Loft, and I'm sure I'm going to gain altitude because I just had this thought yesterday. But it was so interesting how bummed out I was that my sunflowers looked weathered. Like, I was like, dang, I want them just to look beautiful and show that I'm a great gardener and all of these things. And I'm not really a great gardener. I just started gardening. So that's an unrealistic expectation that I've set from I don't even know where, but I probably do. But I won't bore you with breaking down the layers of that and why I think that might be the case. But that being said, I thought about it and I'm like, how dare I expect nature to operate at 110% all the time? This was a really interesting reflection for myself because I'm going through this phase where I am constantly trying to operate at extraordinary all the time. Like, I'm not trying to be a good wife, I'm not be a good mom, a good friend, a good professional. I'm trying to be extraordinary all the time. And so I found recently my kids have been more anxious and we've been really trying to get into this house. We're building a house. We're trying to transition and moving into it. And that had a lot of complexities on its own. And I realized my system's been highly stressed because no matter how much, weather and stress that my system is incurring, I'm still trying to operate at this optimal level of extraordinary and success, like this sunflower that needs to be beautiful and bloomed and like it's being basked in the sun all the time. And that's just not true. The sunflower was showing that it was weathered. It got cold. It went from the 80s, high 80s, almost 90, and dropped into the 40s. And it's a living system. It's responding to its environment. And this is what it looks like when it responds to that environment. No malice, no good, no nothing. There's no implication besides the fact that it's just externalizing what it feels internally because of the weather. And we're taught as humans to mask that externalization of what's really happening on the inside of our system because we're no longer allowed to be life and living and adaptive and learning. We have to be this thing that presents as like, I already know. I'm already adapted. I know what I'm doing. I don't weather under harsh conditions. And that's just not true. It's honestly just not true, at least not from what I've experienced. I've experienced a lot of heavy weather where I've put this mask on and all it's done is driven me further into anxiety, depressive states, believing that I'm not enough, having a ton of extra pressure put on myself to, excel in the things that really don't even sustain life, which is just going back to how reciprocity, if you're really watching how nature works, you both have to give and take and you have to ebb and flow through the different conditions and the different seasons that come in life. But we've totally taken and abstracted that from the human process and decided like, nope, you get to learn the framework that shapes what we think. We're not going to talk about what we think or why we're thinking it or why it's there at all or how we make it better, how we make it more precise, how we make it more legible, interpretable. Because what we really do as humans when it comes to language, we don't speak the same language. We use a tool that was given to us, which are the ABCs that turn into words, that turn into paragraphs, that turn into, language that we're trying to interpret and send to other people. But really what we're doing is we're packaging up this tool that we've installed into our system, and it has been installed. This is not natural. If it was natural, we'd all speak the same language. It's natural to make noise with our mouths, I think, but I don't think it's necessarily natural that we have formulated words specifically as we use them. Because if you really look at words and what they really mean, we often don't even use them the way that we really meant originally. But again, we're still working with someone's original tool that we installed into our system, and then we use it in order to communicate. And honestly, I'm not sure any of us are even looking at it like that. We're just looking like, oh, this is a natural process that happens, like pooping. Like, yeah, pooping doesn't take quite the interaction that language does. So that being said, it's always interesting to me when people say, well, I said, well, what you said was a summarization of what you interpreted, what you felt, what you thought, what environmental conditions were weighing on you, what systems were on board, which ones were offline, inside yourself, like all the internal conditions. Like we are our own systems independent to ourselves that then interact with other systems that interact with other systems. And it's very much like that Russian doll that just keeps opening up over and over again. But it's so interesting to me how all of these things are actually portrayed to us rather than just being faced with the reality of what it is. So as I was falling asleep last night, I was thinking, isn't that so interesting? The approach we have with children is not teaching them how to use this tool, what the tool is doing, how to break down what the tool means inside your system, and then how to recalibrate it and repackage it and send it back out so that they could be understood. Well, hold on. So they could have the best chance at being understood and surviving the static of the field. But even then, installing the concept that even then, you can try and do all of this, but it doesn't mean you're always going to be understood by other people because of all those different layers and things inside everything and inside the containers that we try to interact with. And the truth is that's okay, because language is just a tool to try and accomplish something. And because we believe that we can't be wrong, there's this refusal to iterate. And that is just insane to me. Imagine planting a seed and saying, well, you should be a redwood that's grown in the forest over time forever. Like, that's crazy. I feel like that's what the modern day education system does, is they try to instill what you will be when you grow up and try to expedite the process to get you there. But really, you have to go through all the different phases that it takes to mature into that tree, to have that altitude. You must experience it for yourself. You must break down. You must face the weather. You must learn to adapt. And we are living systems that need to adapt over time. There's no getting anywhere. That's the biggest fallacy I think that we've been given in our lifetime, isn't it? That we are getting somewhere. No, you're not getting somewhere. You're not going somewhere. You are someone. You are doing something. You are interacting somewhere. But it's not this, that's what I think really happened is we keep moving this focus and this lens way out to who we're going to become, that we miss that we have to be the person we are in order to be who we're going to become. And then it begs the question, does future you own past you? And does past you own future you? Or is it different versions of yourself that we have to allow ourselves to be? And that's an interesting concept in itself that I didn't expect to bring up right now, but it's inside the field and it's inside what's kind of coming out about this topic. So one of the things I'm really doing here at the Loft and with the lessons with my kids is trying to develop a pathway so cognition can elevate through the different levels of altitude of understanding nuance and other things that interact with oneself than how we interact on the outside. And I think it's absolutely paramount that we begin with the inside of the system and understanding how the inside of the system functions, because that's how kids really form identity. Identity that can't be altered by other outside influences. It can be altered from inside the system, which is where the altering should be happening, because there should be a sense of internal coherence that allows someone to gain confidence in their system's ability to face whatever comes to them. But again, in modern day education systems, we're oriented towards external systems. This is what other people found. This is what other people think. And this is how you be nice and behave with other people. And this is how it is. And it's very interesting that we do that to children because it's so highly overstimulating and so low internal coherence focus that it makes sense why kids have high senses of anxiety. It makes sense why kids have low internal coherence and confidence in themselves and the ability to do things, especially because they're like, oh, we're kids, you can't do that yet. No, I don't present anything as something that a kid can't do. I present it as you have to have a certain altitude to truly understand that, to do it effectively or safely. But I don't put an age, when age is so interesting to me, Age is so interesting to me. How we use age as a metric for how things function. I just don't understand it. I think that there's like an implied implication that babies can't walk, but there's no set age a baby walks. Like literally, we do that all the time. That's not age appropriate, but then we say, oh, these people don't fall into the age category. I think what happened is age is such a simple metric to use, especially if you look at how modern day system that we inhabit is formed. It's really based on really simplistic, flat, lack of nuance, like structure. And then if you don't fit into it, somehow you're in the wrong. And if you fit into it, but you still feel like there's something wrong, it's just ignore it and keep moving. You're in it and you're successful. And hey, there's money in your account. And hey, by the way, I haven't even started talking about money yet. That's another insane thing to talk about when you really start thinking about it. And really, I don't even know if any of this is true, or at least like for everybody. But I've seen the fruit of it. I've seen me be able to elevate in my own conscious ability to evaluate what I'm saying versus what I meant while I'm actually observing other people inside the container interact with it. And it's very interesting when you practice it, how you're able to settle your system and almost install a secondary filter that says, what's going on in here and what's really trying to come through? Because we're just not practiced at trying to articulate ourselves, and we're not practiced at understanding that when someone's saying something to you, that's the first time that they're articulating that particular thought or their inner architecture. And most people don't have a really good grasp on what's happening on their inner architecture. So you should assume like, let's try that a few more times before I assign any real moral value, weight, or at least any devastation to your own internal system. Because if you're evaluated on that, like every first take, it's like, God, I hope I'm not evaluated on my first take. I say some crazy fucking things in the first couple, minutes that I'm talking. Well, how many minutes am I in here? 21 minutes and 21 seconds. I've said some crazy stuff. I'm going to go back and listen to this, and I'm going to, take the transcript and I'm going to work with it. And I'm going to see what's really coming through in this raw signal. And it's possible that some people are getting offended or upset, or maybe they're feeling like, oh, they agree. But the truth is, everything I'm saying here is raw signal, which means it's available for you to take and pick apart. Why did I not like that? Why did I resist that? Why did I think that was good? What belief did I have to have in order to make that true? And this can get really overwhelming. So you don't want to be in a container like this all the time, because you are a living system. So you do need natural reprieve from the conscious layer of your system. But it is important, and it is interesting that when you start looking at how modern day education systems are formed and how we believe that's how we become successful, although none of us have really determined what success really looks like, because that it is a subjective thing. I don't even know what to call it. Sorry. I'm running out of, this is how I know I'm getting the end of a signal. For me, it starts to become more fragmented, and I start to lose sharpness on the words that are coming through, which is an interesting thought and realization to have while you're interacting with raw signal. So that's another thing you can do, is really, while thoughts are coming through and you're starting to struggle with those thoughts, why am I delaying here? Is this the end of the signal, or am I reaching a belief, or am I reaching something that's getting uncomfortable with my system to actually admit to itself, which is another concept in itself. But anyways, that was just an interesting thought I had before I fell asleep last night. And here's my thoughts, what I call my second pass on those thoughts, because I knew I would come back to them today and have more thoughts on it. But it is very interesting to me, the entire system, how it's set up, and how it's so highly focused on external systems and not the system that we are as the human beings, which are actually the life force and the life that's living, which is a crazy thought to begin with. So thanks for tuning in. Thanks for listening. Just some raw signal coming out, left over from a little bit last night over into today. Even if you disagree with the whole thing, I hope that you take away some type of interaction with yourself, or you pick up some type of something that helps you interact with yourself in a different way and a different light, with even just a marginal different perspective than you had coming into it. Have a great day.